We're talking old guys. Who's aging out of the NFL and who is not? PFF's 30 over 30 with the author of those articles. We got John Kosko. We're talking draft. We're talking most improved teams around the NFL as well on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson, as always, at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We love our everydayers. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you're listening to this podcast. Today's episode of P&W is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. And now let me introduce today's esteemed guest from Pro Football Focus, John Kosko, joining us to talk about the entire league. We're going to talk about his latest at PFF.com. The NFL's 30 over 30, the top players that are a little bit older and maybe even some 40-year-olds, which makes me happy on the list. John, it was a sad day, though, when Tom Brady retired because there was nobody left in the NFL that was older than me. And, you know, it's nice that there's some kickers and punters hanging on, and you still got Aaron Rodgers now in his 40s. So it makes me feel a little bit better. Aaron Rodgers, my guy, we crossed paths at Butte College back in the day in Northern California. Didn't know him. He could have sat next to me in the class, and I would have had no idea. But eventually it was like, wait, who's this kid from Cal? He's from Chico? What the heck's going on here? But let's get into your stuff here. And again, appreciate you joining us today, John. 30 over 30. Who's the best old guy in the NFL right now?
Yeah, we have the best guy as Trent Williams from the 49ers. He has been an absolute monster for the 49ers since getting, becoming on the team a couple years ago. In 2021, he had an outrageous season where he was graded at like a 98.9 level. His run blocking has just been phenomenal. He's obviously still a really good pass protector. And over the past 3 years, like his combined grade is a 98.2. Like he's just been playing at an extremely high level that we have not seen in the PFF era. So like he's like the best player almost in the NFL, regardless of position, and taking away like, value standpoint, quarterbacks were obviously most valuable. From a down-to-down basis, there's basically nobody else that's been playing better than Trent Williams in the NFL.
John, it's great to have you on. And, you'll see a lot of lists of 25 players that are 25 years or younger. And I know PFF just put one of those up as well. But those kind of things start popping up around the internet. But I found it unique to do the old guys. And I immediately thought of golf. I know nothing about golf, but I always think about the senior tour, that the rookies should be the best players. Whoever ages out of the young guy tour gets to the senior tour and should be the best dude. So did you have a lot of guys that like just turned 30 that cracked this and started dominating?
Yeah, there's a couple of players on this list that just turned 30. Or my criteria for this list was age of 30 by the week 1 of the NFL season. And there's a couple of guys on here that are technically not 30 yet. Chris Jones being one of them. He turns 30 actually in July.
Some of these guys made me feel old. I'm like, Chris Jones and Laramie Tunsil are on this list. How old am I, man?
I know. Like,
it's their third contracts already too, so it does pay to get in the NFL a little bit early and get that clock going.
Absolutely, and you look at a guy like Amari Cooper as well. Like he feels like a guy that's been around forever, and he's only 29 as of right now. He turns 30 in this summer. He may turn 30 this off season or something like that, but. It's just, again, like it seems like you get these guys that, these guys have been around forever. He's got to be like mid 30s, but their age is young. But so you're right. Like this is a big reason why some teams really prioritize young guys, that they can have them for multiple more years. Look at like a Penei Sewell who was drafted and he was 20 years old. He's only 23 years old right now. And he feels like he's already been in the league for a while. And he's the best right tackle in all the NFL. So it's like, yeah, you get some of these guys that are just cracking the age of 30 that are making this list. And but the thing is, like, there's a lot of really good players that are over the age of 30 in the NFL. When you go through the group of players in that category, it's really large, and it's kind of surprising. I had to leave some really good players off this list, like a Taylor Decker out of Detroit. He's a really good left tackle. But just didn't.
I was going to
crack it.
ask you who your just missed guys were.
Yeah, Levante David, linebacker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, another really good player. I had to leave him off the list. I could put some honorable mentions on there and stuff like that. But DJ Reader is another one. He's more of a rotational defensive tackle piece for. But the thing, just got really good players not making the list. So yeah, it was fascinating doing this article. I've done it 2 years in a row now, and it's kind of interesting to see how it's evolved from one year to the next in terms of guys falling or rising on the list.
So using that data you've collected over the last couple of years and looking at all the older players in the NFL, did you find anything that surprised you about maybe certain positions that age better than others, or certain ages where it's like, man, there's, because Trent Williams 36, should we expect that fall off of a cliff at some point for him in the near future?
You probably should. So like offensive line does have longevity, but if the way you're playing is not going to drop off a cliff like a skill position player, right? Because the older you get in that skill position, like, you're reliant on that speed, and that speed will fall, you'll lose it at some point. I think the old moniker of like the running backs, basically once they hit the age of 30, you just expect them not to be able to be very effective. We've seen it over throughout NFL history of guys, maybe retiring 1 year or 2 years too late. Jim Brown and Barry Sanders, they retired at the peak of their career. Who knows what they could have done, right? But you kind of assume that based on history, the guys, they fall off, and they fall off fast at that skill position. Offensive line, you've seen it with like Tyrone Smith. He was such a dominant left tackle for so long, but now he's like 38, 39 years old. Nobody, you still see the skills, but like he can't hold up for like a long season type of thing, for the NFL anymore. So yeah, I think you see it with the offensive line, defensive line too, and then you start losing it at the other skill positions much, much more quickly.
Where I found that most obvious, and it didn't shock me, but I don't remember a corner being on your top 30 list. I mean, 30 is a bad age for corners. And if people are out there looking at their favorite team and, they sign a 29-year-old to a 3-year deal, like, the end is probably near,
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I didn't even think about it when I was doing this, which is interesting because like one of the main things I do at PFF is like cornerback play. But you're absolutely right. There was not a single player that I even considered.
I don't even know who'd be in this consideration. Yeah.
Maybe Stephon Gilmore would be probably the guy, but
he's unemployed.
Yeah. Right? So like it's one of those things like, if the guy was a free agent, like, I'm not putting him on the list because no team is wanting him at this point. And I think it's, even if he's graded well in our system, there's a reason why this guy isn't being signed right now. Sometimes it's like, the guy's just waiting for June 1st to hit, and teams are waiting for like the cheaper contracts for those guys. But I think if you were good enough, they would want to have you on your team, right? So, the cornerback position, like, that takes a lot of athleticism and reaction speeds, especially like at least at the wide receiver spot, you can dictate. Exactly what the route is and how you're going to be able to set this guy up, versus like it's all reaction speed when it comes to the safety and cornerback position. There's one safety on this list, which is Tyrann Mathieu, who's actually played some of his best ball in the past 2 years, which has been interesting to see.
Looking at some of these position groups, one running back on the list, it's Derrick Henry, who's just also barely 30, right? And so I think we see with the corners and running backs, you start to see those guys in their 30s. They become mercenaries, a bunch of 1-year deals. And was there any other running backs that were close? And where do you think Derrick Henry is on that cliff of being like, okay, you're an old guy now? Because it's pretty wild to think of how young that ends for running backs in the NFL, and thinking back to guys who have been retired for 10 years who are still, younger than I am. It's like, man, that guy must be old now. No, he's still 35. He's been out of the league for 8 years already. How long do you think Derrick Henry has on the shelf? And were there any other running backs close to the list?
I've been thinking Henry's going to fall off the cliff for 3 years now. I'm done doubting that guy,
Yeah, same. I thought he was going to be cooked last year. I thought last year we were going to see the big decline from him. And he did kind of look like that in the beginning of the year, and then really had a strong second half of the season. Kind of what he always does, which is interesting. So I feel like he's going to like fall off a cliff. Like his body size, his style of running, like that generally is not going to be like, for a guy that big I don't feel like I can hold up for much longer. But I think he's going to enjoy in Baltimore lighter boxes because of the threat of Lamar Jackson. And so his wear and tear is probably going to be less this year than it has been in any other year of his career. And he's got a couple of guys that can spell him, and Keaton Mitchell. They got another guy I can't remember off the top of my head, but two running backs behind him that can spell him and not give him such of a bigger load. The guy that I could have put in there was Raheem Mostert. He's been awesome the past 2 years. But I actually decided to leave him off because I felt like, he's in a running back by committee at that position in Miami, and he's going to be even more so this year. And he's going to be like, I just think what he provided for, I had some like value aspect to this list, right? So, kind of some of the quarterbacks are kind of pushed up a little bit because of the value that they bring, and from what Mostert brings to the table for the Dolphins. Like he just scored 18 touchdowns this year, so I don't see that happening again. And I can see, he's 33 at this point. Like I could see it like really quickly a drop off that would come for a guy, that age, that position.
Yeah, Raheem Mostert was an interesting. He kind of bucks all the trends at running back too, because he was such a late breakout guy, and there was so much less tread taken off of his tires early in his life. So he's kind of like, more like a 5-year younger running back, even though he's 33 years old. But his game is speed too. So you would expect that at some point, and he's had some injuries in his career, that will fall off a cliff for a player like Raheem Mostert. All right, fascinating stuff. Let's talk a little bit more about the NFL at large. Who improved themselves the most? You did one recently at PFF.com about the most improved position groups. And Bo Nix, what about the quarterbacks in the NFL draft? We'll get to all of it with John Kosko next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by Game Time. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. The schedule's out. I'm sure you're eyeing some ball games. Go to Game Time, download the Game Time app, and you can get tickets to all those games. It's just a couple of taps. Couldn't be easier. All-in pricing. You can get a great deal, and you see the total up front if you toggle on the all-in pricing feature, which I love. So you don't get that surprise at checkout, which is my least favorite part of buying tickets for any event. And a couple of taps, they're right there on the Game Time app. Sometimes you forget 6 months later where you even got the tickets. They're right there on the app for you. You don't have to go through fishing through your emails to find those tickets when it comes to actual game time and you arrive at your event. Concerts, comedy, you name it, you can find it all. And plus last-minute deals. Save up to 66% off buying last-minute sports, concerts, and comedy and theater tickets near you with the Game Time app. So take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Let's talk Bo Nix. One of your latest at PFF.com. By the way, you can find all the work that John does and the entire crew. Fantastic group, which I was once a part of at Pro Football Focus. And also John Kosko 3 is where you can find him on Twitter. Make sure you are subscribed there. By the way, John, did we ever cross paths back in 2016? I wonder if we might have worked on a project together. And because as I know the name and I've seen it around for so long, but there was an army of folks behind the scenes that people might not know about at PFF.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2016. It's been 8 years since then. Like I don't even remember like half the things that I was doing at PFF back in that time. But it's very possible we were doing some projects together for sure. I know that my first 2 years with PFF, I was doing a lot of player participation, and I know that you were doing some player participation. So it's very, very possible we were working some PP together.
Absolutely. Late nights for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Late nights. And the whole thing is like just evolved completely since then too. So I don't know if were you around when we were doing it in spreadsheets and stuff, or was it in the browser? Yeah. So now it's in the browser. We have like a whole data collection tool that we use that's online now rather than doing it in spreadsheets. It's so much better now.
I wish folks out there, and a lot of people try to dunk on PFF and they don't agree with what the grades that are spit out at certain places. I wish people could understand how much work goes into all the data you see at PFF. It's pretty unbelievable. And I'm sure even more now than when I was there.
Yeah, like I said, it's evolved a bunch since then. And yeah, it's many hours, thousands of hours of grinding on these games, and people that think that like the grades are just spit it out from a data perspective is, it's far from the case. We're sitting there, we're evaluating every single player, we're grading every player's interaction on the field, every single play. So it's a lot more than just saying, hey, in this algorithm and this is what the grade spits out. It is not that at all.
Stuck Bo Nix, what's going on with the Denver Broncos? How did you feel about the Bo Nix pick, and just all the quarterbacks in general? Is there a feel for you with bust potential, with where the landing spots were, how you like how some of these teams operated with finding their potential next franchise quarterback?
Yeah, so I actually, day of the day one of draft, I actually had an article published, the bust potential of the rumored top 10 picks of the draft, and I had 4 quarterbacks in that, and with obviously the top 3 guys, and then I added JJ McCarthy. I basically have them all as a high bust potential because like anybody that thinks that they know how these guys are going to play in the NFL are fooling themselves, right? Because there's so much unknown that you have about everybody, and you just go back to the 2021 draft. You had Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, and that whole group, Jack Wilson, and Lance.
Yeah.
Right. Like everybody's all super high, and these guys thinking that they're going to be the next guy. 4 of them basically have bust. 4 of them are on different teams at this point, and Trevor Lawrence isn't exactly living up to the hype that he was billed as, right? So you just don't know about these guys. When it comes to like Bo Nix, I from a data perspective, he looks great. Especially since transferring from Auburn to Oregon, I don't think that from a data perspective, there was probably a better quarterback prospect. But obviously, like, data only takes you so far, and you've got to love what you see on the field. You have to take everything into consideration, and it's only a piece of the puzzle. He was phenomenal under pressure at Oregon. He was accurate. He avoided sacks at an insanely high rate, which is all things that you want to see from a quarterback moving to the next level. But really, he was protected by a phenomenal Oregon team there. A great offensive line, good weapons, good scheme, had a ton of screens that would help out there. So, I think from a Bo Nix to Denver perspective, they thought he was the 3rd best quarterback in this draft class. And when you see that and you've already had 5 quarterbacks go off the board, I do not blame them for just going, we got to take our guy because we need to upgrade at this position. So, do I think 12 was high for a guy like that? Sure, yeah. But considering what happened up until that point, I don't think you can do anything but draft that guy. I think Michael Penix being drafted at number 8 really kind of threw a wrench into the whole thing because I don't think anybody expected them to draft a quarterback, right? So I think if they had maybe the Raiders behind them probably were wanting to draft a quarterback. At that point, 6 were off the board. You're picking 13th. There's no chance that you're picking a quarterback at that point. There's not even a semblance of a next quarterback that you'd say you'd take. So I think when you're a quarterback needy team, you got to take a quarterback and you hope for the best, and you put a good team around them to let them succeed.
So, John, yesterday we broke down actually all the AFC West draft classes, and something I kind of talked about with Nix was, in a vacuum, I like him. I don't love him. I don't think he's a phenomenal prospect. I don't see a super high ceiling. I even, compared him to Kenny Pickett a little bit, where he should have been like the 20th pick in the draft, and he's fine, but probably isn't going to be the next Mahomes or anything like that. But one thing I did note was for Sean Payton and for Nix, I think that's a really good combination for the two of them. I give him a little bit of bonus prize for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked about that in my article, how he fits really well with Sean Payton's system. Sean Payton likes he doesn't run a lot of play action. I think he needs to lean into that with Bo Nix to help him. But he likes his quick game stuff. He's heavy on stick and spacing concepts, something that Oregon ran a lot and Nix was really good at. He's really good with pre-snap reads and avoiding negative plays in his game, things that Sean Payton loves to see out of his quarterbacks. And I think, he's an accurate quarterback. He's not going to be Drew Brees level accuracy. Like Brees was one of the most accurate quarterbacks in NFL history. But I think what you can get from him is a guy that's going to be able to run his system, make the right reads and kind of protect the ball. I think he has a high floor. I think it's a low ceiling, like you were saying. He's not, you're not going to be a guy that probably ever going to be a top 5 quarterback, but you can win a lot of games with the Jared Goff. And I think that's kind of like the type of player he can be. Goff is a guy that when pressure was on and like the system, like maybe the offensive line was just not really good. Goff was awful, but you put the right system around the good offensive line, good weapons around him, and he excels. He's nobody thinks that Goff is the second best quarterback. He's the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL now. Nobody thinks that, but I think you can obviously recognize that when you put the right pieces around him, he's a really good quarterback. And I think that's what Bo Nix can be. So, and especially in that Sean Payton system. And I think one of the big frustrations that Payton had with Wilson is that Wilson just not really good with pre-snap read type of stuff. And that's where Sean Payton's system is best at, is being able to find where you're going to go with the ball early before the snap happens and then distribute the ball where it needs to go.
More with John Kosko of Pro Football Focus. Let's talk most improved teams and position groups to finish it up next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook, and it's winner take all time right now in the NBA and the NHL. And FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and a whole lot more, including NFL futures. Tons of NFL bets. The schedule is out. You could bet on games already. There is who's going to win the next Super Bowl odds, offensive, defensive, rookie of the year odds, and so much more in the NFL and every sport you can imagine at FanDuel. And all you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started and make every playoff shot count. Get an extra $150 to play with as well. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So quarterback's obviously the easiest way, John, if you're going to improve your football team. That's the place to do it. And that's why the Falcons shock everybody and draft Michael Penix. That's why the Denver Broncos draft Bo Nix maybe earlier than ideal. My big problem with the Bo Nix pick is, okay, let's say he bumps his head on the ceiling of what he could be with the talent around him in Denver. Is that good? You're still the third best quarterback in your division. It starts to get a little bit dicey of what you're trying to accomplish there with the Denver Broncos. And a lot has to go right, and a lot has to be great around a quarterback that might not have the highest ceiling in the world. If you're trying to be the next Jared Goff or to be the next, Brock Purdy, maybe even. You don't have to be, superstar level tools to be a great NFL quarterback. And so that's what some of these teams are hoping for with their quarterbacks. And we've seen it recently with the Cleveland Browns. And I know that's your team, John. Yeah. Let's start with the Cleveland Browns. Is this a team that is ready to make some noise in that division? Obviously a team that did some interesting maneuvers at quarterback, because when you don't have a quarterback, you got to do what you can to try to get one. It's easy for us to say, oh, don't draft Michael Penix or Bo Nix. That's too high. But it's like, man, if you don't have a quarterback, you got to find one, or else you're looking for a new job eventually.
Yeah, the Browns are an interesting case because it all hinges on Deshaun Watson, and they made obviously the monster trade to bring him in, and he's not lived up to those expectations yet. Naturally, the first year is, I think everybody kind of assumed he'd be suspended for most, or if not the whole year, and it came down, he was suspended 11 games or whatever, and so that was almost going to be kind of a lost season in terms of that. And when you're getting a quarterback, you're looking long term. Last year he was injured, so then it's like he's basically played 6 games for the Browns in 2 years. More than 6 games, like 10 games or whatever in 2 years, which is not really much of a sample size to go off of when you're off of a 700-day rust of never playing in the game and then having injuries and stuff like that. It's like, what do you know about this guy at this point? Can he get back to the Houston Texans, Deshaun Watson, the player? Obviously, and if you can get that caliber of quarterback, they are legit Super Bowl contenders, right? So we saw it last year. They're on their 5th string quarterback at one point, and they made the playoffs, which is a really, really rare feat for an NFL team. So they have all the pieces around that quarterback position to be a legit Super Bowl contender to compete with the Kansas City Chiefs of the world, and it all hinges on whether Deshaun Watson can deliver on basically that compensation that the Browns gave up for him, because I think they rightfully recognize that Baker Mayfield was not the guy. And I think you should always draft or go for upside of that quarterback position. And I think Baker Mayfield has a limit to his ceiling, and he's got a floor, and you kind of understand where he's at. And, like your point with, do you Bo Nix being good, his ceiling is probably the 3rd best quarterback in his own division. And is that good enough for a team that you're trying to go for a Super Bowl? Probably not. Like, you want to be going for a top 5 type of guy. There's been 2 quarterbacks in the NFL that have beaten Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Tom Brady, he's gone, and Joe Burrow, who's been battling injuries and stuff like that. So it's like there's only basically one guy left in the NFL that can do what needs to be done at that quarterback position, and you have to go for that upside. And I get why the Browns did it.
And their window could be closing. I mean, Watson's contract is very restrictive, and he's owed tons of money. You mentioned how many quarterbacks they went through last year, and they're definitely in win now mode, is why I bring that up. But do you still find it curious that they would go sign Huntley and Jameis Winston after drafting DTR last year?
Yeah, so I think they recognized, hey, like, we had multiple injuries at the position, and we want to be set going into the season. And I would have to look at their contracts and stuff like that. I think Winston's there to stay. I'm not sure Huntley's contract is like, this guy's a lock for the team. And I think they're basically they're hoping that, like, maybe DTR is the type of guy that can, be that 3rd string quarterback. They drafted him in the 5th round, so it's not like you're married to that guy at all. Right. So, like, I think they're just basically trying to get themselves set up for that position in terms of, like, the backup, right? Because we just never know, right? Like, I think you never know. I kind of like the mentality that not the Patriots, but the Colts had, and Tom Moore, when he was the offensive coordinator. It's like, I see that you never give your number to your backup quarterback any reps in practice. And he's like, well, if Peyton goes down, then we're screwed. Like, what's the point of giving the backup any reps? Like, it's either Peyton's healthy and we're getting 13 wins this year or not. So, I like that mentality. It's like, and then you go and draft Andrew Luck the one year that you suck for a year, right? So,
yeah, I love.
He was
that.
right. Yeah,
the David Robinson and Tim Duncan thing too. It's like, yeah, just lean into it. Either be great or go find another way to be great, and instead of trying to fight for the middle, which is kind of like, well, I don't like some of these moves at quarterback. The end result is still in the middle. The end result might be at the bottom for a team like the Raiders, who were out on the outside looking in. If they wanted to draft a quarterback at number 13, you had a piece recently talking about the best and worst position groups post off season, and the worst position quarterback group was the Raiders, and the best is in their own division. in the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. Aside from that one, did you see any other, big movement at position groups or teams? Like who's winning the offseason for you, John?
The teams that are winning, it's always hard when you say that who's winning the offseason, right? Like I think the Washington Commanders did a good job this offseason. Is it enough? I'm not sure, right? They obviously rehauled the entire coaching staff, obviously drafting Jaden Daniels at that quarterback position. Again, that's a high upside move. Also, it could be a massive bust. Like, I think there's a lot of data that would say that he what is it? He over 52% of the time when he gets pressured, he's either taking a sack or scrambling, which is generally not a good trait to have at the quarterback position. You want to usually end that in a throw. So there's massive bust potential with that. But they made moves this offseason to improve that team around him. I think defensively they're probably still going to struggle. Because they traded away their good players that they had in the middle of the season last year. So they could be something there. I think the Eagles did a really good job of revamping their team. I think this offseason they kind of knocked it out of the park with the secondary. Their secondary last year got old really quickly. They were one of the best in 2022 and obviously leading to the Super Bowl. And then in my opinion, one of the biggest reasons why they fell off a cliff last year was because their defense was old, and they obviously recognized that and attacked that for getting improvement in their secondary. So, those two teams I wouldn't say are have one of the strongest position groups. On my article, I don't have them as the best at any one of those positions or any position at a group at all. The Eagles kind of were the best offensive line in football. Losing Jason Kelce does hurt that for sure. And that became the Lions, they're the best offensive line now. So yeah, I think, from the Eagles, they should be a lot better than they were last year because their defense should be much improved in that aspect.
That is John Kosko. You can find all of his work at pff.com, on Twitter at John Kosko3, 30 over 30, tons of great work done by John and the entire team over at PFF. John, appreciate the time jumping on with us today, and hope you get some time to take some time off. I know there's a lot of hours and a lot of data and a lot of time involved during the season, during draft season. Hopefully you can get refreshed before training camp starts again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I got some vacation planned this summer. One thing that we didn't talk about is I had George Kittle ranked higher than Travis Kelce, thinking that this is you guys are 49ers guys. We would have
one of us a 49ers guy.
Matt's a Steelers guy. I'm a 49ers guy. I saw the Kittle on the list and I was like, well, I knew he was going to be there. So I don't know if I should bring that up because of course he's there, but I didn't even think about that you had him higher than Travis Kelce, which is exactly the right call. So props to you for realizing that blocking still matters in the NFL.
Yeah, that's the big, last year was the first year we saw Travis Kelce have kind of a real big dip in his play. And when I say big dip, most of that came in the run blocking aspect of it. He's still very good as a receiver, but Kittle's younger by 4 years. And, it's my article. I can do whatever I want with it.
It was something I don't want to keep you much longer, but it was something I was going to bring up in the first segment was a lot of these all-time great tight ends fade away really slow. They last. Yeah, Antonio Gates and Witten and Gonzalez, they ran like me at the end of their careers. I mean, Jimmy Graham, and I can see those guys hanging around because they have that old man at the Y game. How do you get that rebound,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. You've seen it with Travis Kelce. He's 34 years old now, and he's just been having some of the best years of his career. We'll probably start to see him not be as effective because I think we saw it. He just wasn't as a physical in run game. I felt like he lost just the tiniest of steps in his speed and his route running and stuff like that. And Kittle is just, he's a monster. I feel like he's really underrated. If you go into the comments section of the tweet that was posted out there, people are roasting fact that having Kittle over Kelce. And it's okay. I don't know.
I
wrote for ESPN for 10 years. Don't go to the comment section.
All right.
Go to the comment section for sure, except for the YouTube comment section here. on Peacock and Williamson. Only rosy things being said there. We appreciate y'all. Make sure you hit subscribe while you're there, and make sure you go follow John on Twitter, John Kosko 3. Read all the stuff at pff.com. John, appreciate you jumping on with this. Appreciate all the everydayers out there. Matt and I back tomorrow right here. Peacock and Williamson.